ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world. This is a moment we've all been waiting for. The man that we have discussed, we have followed, we have watched, we have encouraged, we have criticized is finally here. The holiday time is here. World Cup is fully on and politics never ends. And we are very proud and thankful to finally have us joining here on Independent Americans, the great and powerful Andrew Yang. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here. I'm sorry it's taken so long. And thank you for all you've done for the country and continue to do.
It's great to have you here. I was getting a little worried. We started the hashtag Where is Yang? But we've used in the past, and I think it got some folks'
My
attention.
wife wants to know the same thing sometimes, man. She's like, where is that guy?
Well, I'm glad you're finally here. We've had a lot of close encounters where we almost had you on when you were running for president. I was really incredibly inspired by that campaign and by all you're doing and by your wife and family. I think you're a really important and powerful role model. I almost endorsed you for mayor. You may not know this, but I was supposed to be at an event, and I told them the one condition was I needed to meet you beforehand. That didn't happen, but I was a supporter of your mayoral run. I think we have a lot of alignment on vision around the future for independence. So I'm excited to get into all of it. But let's start with a question I ask of everyone. Where are you and how are you, Andrew?
I am great. Just had a nice Thanksgiving holiday with my in-laws. I'm in New York City in Manhattan, not that far from where you are. Actually, we're probably, 55, 60 blocks apart. We could have done this shit in person, Paul, but if we know.
Well, we also are getting this in before the World Cup. That was part of the alignment too here. We're recording this on Tuesday. The game's in about 2 hours. I know you're a big sports
score prediction. What are we going to do?
Hey, if you're going to put it out there, I'm going to ask you to predict that. We'll start with a hard one. Predict the score on U.S. versus Iran. This will air after it's already happened. And you're a big Jets fan. You're a Knicks fan. I mean, it's an exciting time, but are we about to have our hearts broken there like we do in politics all the time?
I'm optimistic on the Jets and the Giants, for that matter, making the playoffs. I think 9-7 might be enough to do it.
Yeah,
Mike White's my new fucking hero. Come on, Mike White.
Dude.
By the way, the best thing you can say about Mike White is that his teammates clearly love him, and like the contrast between him and Zach Wilson is frankly night and day.
It's true.
Yeah, it's true. You know, I mean, like at the end of the day, these guys are in the trenches. Like, who the hell do they want to, like bust their asses with, or alongside, or for? In terms of U.S. versus Iran, I'm going to say the U.S. prevails 1-0. That's going to be my prediction. So we'll know whether I'm right by the time this thing airs.
It's exciting. It's fun. It's about so much more than soccer. And I said this before on the show, I don't think there's any more exciting place in America to watch the World Cup than New York City, because you've got people rooting for every team in every neighborhood, on every bus, everywhere. It's not the same as when it happens in the summer, but there's an electricity that I think is really unique to this city, and especially with our team doing as well as they have, right?
Yeah, it is a little weird to have a World Cup during the colder months. I mean, it's been kind of confusing, but hey, you're right.
Well, it's an optimistic time for New York sports and for American soccer, but kind of a dark and trying time for American politics. We are now out of the most important election of our time until the next one. There was no red wave, but I talked a lot about how there was a camouflage wave of veterans that got elected, and also an independent wave. And you've jumped into this in a big way. You are now, I think, whether it's by default or by design, maybe the leading voice for independence or independent politics in America. But I want to ask you, maybe this conversation can be about convincing me and other independents why this is the right idea, why this is something worth investing our time and energy in. And I guess maybe I'll start with a question. I think your analysis has been spot on. I think you've laid out the problem better than almost anybody in America. I'm not sure about your proposed solution. So maybe we can start there and ask you, why is the solution to the two-party duopoly another party?
Well, first, Paul, appreciate everything you said about where I am in terms of this movement. I feel the same way about you, and I feel the same way about a lot of people who serve the country. I was at a Veterans for Political Innovation event, and they talked about how when you're serving, you don't really talk politics all that much. It's frowned upon, and that the numbers I've seen are either 40 or 50% of military veterans are independents. And I met a lot of vets building forward over this last number of months, and military veterans will just come up to me completely unbidden in public and just say, hey, like, thank you for what you're doing, because they sense that it's about the country. It's not about anything less than that. The two-party system is not working, and in my mind, if you think it's not working, so one of the jokes I tell is like the worst number of parties you can have is one. The second worst is two.
Right.
So the third worst is probably going to be three, but three would be a massive improvement over two, because right now there's such this black, white, good, evil binary conversation where almost half of Democrats think Republicans are corrupt and a threat to the country. Almost half of Republicans think Democrats are corrupt and a threat to the country. And neither has to actually solve any problems or deliver or make you feel any sense of optimism or hope. It's just about whether you hate us just a smidgen less than you hate the other guys. And if you had even a third party in that dynamic, then it does reshuffle it pretty quick, because then you can't just lob grenades at the other side. You might have to form a coalition, get something done. And there are a number of Republican and Democratic, but I think in this case, the Republicans are in the driver's seat, members of Congress who are moderates who are trying to build essentially a fulcrum. And I'd imagine some of them are going to be military veterans. I was pumped that there were these this camouflage wave that you spoke of. I don't know all of the vets who were elected, but I instinctively like them all.
I mean, we've discussed it a lot on this show in the last few years, just the political power of veterans, unique political power, and it can be weaponized for evil, like we've seen Trump do so many times, or it can be harnessed for good, I think, in this independent movement. But I think part of what we've tried to shake out here, Andrew, is that I think independents are largely misunderstood. They're not just the middle, they're often none of the above, and they don't want to join things. Right? Maybe they view themselves as independent. So how can you let me ask you this question. How are you different from the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the Reform Party? Because there are other parties out there. There have been other parties out there. How are you different from them? And why should we put our time and energy behind forward? And can you break through in a way that those other parties haven't and aren't?
This conversation reminds me of my time campaigning in Nevada for Question 3, when they were trying to shift to nonpartisan primaries and ranked choice voting, which I'm sure you've discussed on this program. And there was a military veteran who led off the first TV advertisement, said, hey, I serve the country. I'm an independent, but I can't vote. And, isn't that messed up? And so we got behind that campaign. We're gonna have to do it again in Nevada, so if you're in Nevada, just no, it's coming again in 2024. And so when you look at libertarians and Greens, reform, I think reform is it's more or less defunct. From what I can tell.
You covered it on your podcast
with Jesse Ventura and Jackie Salet, whom we both know. So what they've done is that they've attracted a certain number of people, but they have kind of well-defined brands and ceilings. Honestly, they have low ceilings, lowish ceilings. not to knock anyone who's affiliated with those parties. And what's interesting is that every party is 51 organizations. It's a national party, and then it's 50 state orgs. And so, as someone, and you're an operator, I'm an operator. When you look at these operations, you can evaluate for yourself what you think the cohesion or integrity or resourcefulness is of these 51 organizations. Mm-hmm. You can tell from my tone, mm-hmm. You know, like I think people who are even very close to those parties would say, hey, like, you know, things aren't exactly humming over here. So the goal with Forward is to succeed where others have not succeeded by being smart and opportunistic, where if you look at something like the Nevada ballot initiative, that's a massive opportunity for us to loosen the stranglehold that the two parties have on Nevadan politics. Both parties came out against it. They lost anyway because there are so many people that want a change. Evan McMullen's race, we got behind in a particular way. Clint Smith, those races weren't successful, though Evan did get 43% of the vote, which people would have thought was shocking. So the fun part about Forward is that we're going to press on any of the vulnerabilities in the system. Mm-hmm. and if there's an opportunity, then we pile in behind it while simultaneously building the grassroots level, the state parties in all 50 states. I'm optimistic we're going to succeed in large part because we already have 5 to 10 times the level of resources as either the Libertarians or the Greens about a year in. That's the way I see the world is just, you know, it's like, hey, we have a massive duopoly to break up and disentangle. If you were to look at it from a business sense, which is the way I tend to see things, the value of each of these organizations and all their attendant media organs, and then the rules and regulations they've set in place in various ways. You're talking about 2 multi-billion-dollar behemoth orgs. And then if you're going to create a viable alternative, you're going to need realistically tens of millions of dollars, perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars. So that is the challenge. It's a big challenge. One of the main reasons we've only seen this in the context of billionaires running for president is because that's the scale of the resources that you need.
Right. Yeah. So I guess part of what I'm trying to sort through is how much of your success is a first mover advantage, right? Like you know this, right? There isn't a real alternative, and you're the first guy to the spot on the floor, and you're getting a certain degree of support. And I think the question is, can you make it sustainable? Can you make it durable? If there is a 4th, 5th, 6th party, where does Forward sort out on that? So one of the questions I've been trying to noodle on is Forward a strategy or is it a tactic? Because what I think is, you know, we may be defining the problem similarly, or we may not be. And I've been kind of teasing, and I'm going to formally introduce a plan that I'm calling Operation Independence, which I think is a more comprehensive strategy with 13 different components that are organized collectively around the goal of disrupting the system and empowering independence. Right. And
dude, I'm going to pose an idea for you that is probably one of the 13. You know, great minds thinking alike and all that. Let's see what you think. So the 2020 presidential election was decided by about 70,000 votes in 4 states: Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, and Georgia. So what we're going to do, and would love your help with this, and if people listening to this are into it, what we're going to do is we're going to gather up independents and swing voters in those 4 states, and let's add in Michigan and Pennsylvania, gather a block of several 100,000 genuine independents who say, look, we're up for grabs. We live in these 4 states. We're going to swing the election to whichever major party decides to back nonpartisan primaries, ranked choice voting, gets out of the way of the ballot initiatives, starts looking at multi-member districts and the Fair Representation Act. And we can genuinely push the whole system in a direction because it's so stupid and polarized and locked up that 99% of our votes don't matter. But you know whose votes do matter? The independents and swing voters in Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania. What do you think? 4 and 6 and 24.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you've got a hard sales pitch here, right? And I think that's what I want to get into too, because I think the sales pitch sometimes doesn't land for independence. And I'm going to come back to it because I agree with everything you said. I'm just not sure I need to be a part of the Forward Party to do that. Right. So when I talk about the 13 points, it's things that you support, like open primaries and public funding and ranked choice voting. But I also think it's components like building a media wing, because we don't have an independent media wing.
I think it has to be. I want to see your 13 list.
Right.
keep going,
It
because
has to be, well, there
great
has to
minds,
be,
man. Let's do
right.
that too.
But there also has to be research. There has to be voter registration.
Yeah.
Right. There has to be a grassroots galvanization
We're
of a true
kicking off
movement.
we're kicking off a C3 with
But hold on,
like
let me
about
finish.
$1
Let me
million
finish if I
bucks.
can. But
Keep
this,
going.
but this gets to the other part, which is the forward party is most often identified with you, which is a challenge. I think you recognize that as well as anyone, because independents are going to be reluctant to join a party run by a guy who was a Democrat a year ago, right? You're recruiting for your team, and a lot of folks don't trust it. So how do you square that with folks who are worried that the independent movement shouldn't be leading, be joining what could be viewed as the Yang Party? Right? It's led by you. It's named by you. It's called the same thing your book was called. So how do you square that circle with folks like me that are independents that don't know if it's truly independent?
This is one of the joys of trying to build a tribe of folks who are, by definition, independent or not super into joining.
Right.
And by the way, I kind of resemble this myself. First, let me say that, and hopefully people get a sense of this when they hang out in and around Forward, is I'm very happy to like just be one of many, not be the guy. If you get into the guts of it, I mean, now my co-chair is former Republican Governor Christy Todd Whitman.
Yeah, but hold on, Andrew, because she's been on the show, and we get that, and we know about David Jolly, but you're the political all-star here, and then you got a bunch of role players, right? So it's tough to kind of have it both ways. Because
what sport are we using, bro?
we use whatever sport you want. We can call it basketball, right?
Okay, call it basketball.
But you are the earned media superstar. You're the social media superstar. You're the fundraising superstar, and then you got a group of folks that are not well known, that are maybe from a past time, and I think that's part of the challenge. We had Joe Walsh on here who said that he was approached, he wanted to join, but he didn't want to join because, frankly, you were in charge. So I think it's really an issue, right? And I know you're working on it, but you also have to recognize that it's not solved. You're still on CNN all the time. You're the rock star that brings people to the show. And I guess I'll ask, how do you solve for that? Who have you asked that said no? And who do you want to have to offset that? If you get The Rock tomorrow, yeah, everything changes and he's the rock star. But for now, it's you, and that's a real challenge for, I think, especially folks that are right of center, and maybe more traditionally independent and unaffiliated.
I think you're right that we need to recruit. We need to recruit people that broaden the brand, that make it bigger than any one person or me in particular. Do I have those convos? Yes. Am I optimistic? Also, yes. One of the things that I will suggest is that, it's like, let's say we take the basketball analogy. Let's say that we're the Miami Heat and I'm Dwayne Wade or whatever. Dwayne Wade is very happy to have LeBron and Chris Bosh and whoever else, come join the Heat. Like Dwayne Wade's a team player,
Yeah, but it's more like you're LeBron and trying to get people to move to Cleveland.
Wow, that's a different metaphor. Well, then LeBron does end up, winning a title at some point.
Right. Right. But you get my point. Is like there's a lot of folks that are just going to say, hey, look, and I've used examples from the show. We've had Admiral Stavridis on the show. We've had Mike Mullen on the show, right? I mean, it's not, if Colin Powell had started an independent party, 2 decades ago, it would have been a very different makeup. So by default, it is largely got your fingerprints on it, right? There's especially on the ground. When you meet those organizers, a lot of them are Yang organizers who believe in you.
Yeah, and I think that the org's going to shift over time as the coalition grows. I mean, there are pluses and minuses to having any type of leadership, really, and hopefully people get a sense of this. So the thing I'd suggest to folks who are watching this, who are the profile you describe, or to you, Paul, is to say, functionally, we're on board, I think, with all 13 of the goals that you're describing. And what Forward is meant to do is provide a coalition for people who are trying to get these 13 things done. By the way, most of which are very, very difficult and will require 7 or 8 figures, maybe 9 figures, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to move a mountain. Now, in my opinion, the mountain needs to move. If the mountain doesn't move, we're all fucked. And like history's on our side because this thing's disintegrating. I mean, mountain's gonna fall on everyone if we don't get this job done. So I'm very confident that we're going to be able to do it. For me, and I will say this too, is that if there was something else going on, and it could be one of the joys I've had in this space, and I think you reflect this spirit, is that when you come upon someone who's trying to tackle one aspect of this problem, they're almost never territorial. They're almost never like, no, this is my shit, go away, because they know we're trying to move them out. And they're like, oh, you're here to talk about open primaries and ranked choice voting? Cool. And so so that's the spirit that we should all have. I will say to you, I don't give a shit whether someone says like I'm Forward Party or not. If as long as they show up, they get the job done. Like other people also have other, it's like you're doing this because it's necessary. I'm doing this because I know it's necessary. Like if we get this job done, then we can all go home. Now we're also realistic in that this job will probably take us years and years. So you can't be faint of heart going in.
Look, I see that evolution, right? Like, this is Forward 1.0, and maybe it'll have, versions that evolve over time. But you also haven't, said, hey, I'm only doing one term and I'm going to be out in 2 years and somebody else is going to take over. And you've got the branding baggage of being a guy who ran for president as a Democrat and, the party named after your book and you. So a lot of that is baked in, right?
Like it's Demi. I mean, if you look at it with Christy Todd Whitman and David Jolly and Miles Taylor and the renewed Evan McMullin is another example. There's a huge body of people in Forward that come from the Republican Party. And so in a way, like if you take me out, it actually looks very much like former Republicans.
And that's a challenge too, right? I mean, I've said recently, I think the only person maybe less popular than you in the Democratic Party right now is Tulsi Gabbard. And I think maybe now you've eclipsed her, right? I mean, Democrats are coming after you ferociously. Republicans are skeptical. But I think at the end of the day, you're building something and you're vying for funding and for attention and for market share. And so maybe just staying on this point, is there a wish list of people that you feel, because I do think leadership matters, especially in this environment. We've talked about charismatic, dynamic leadership, and you bring that. You can mention those other folks as much as you want, but they don't bring the star power and the attention that you do. So is there a wish list of people that you feel embody the values of the Forward Party, that if you could add them to the masthead tomorrow, you would add?
I'm going to call out something because this is probably not surprising to anyone, but this gives a sense as to at least what I'd like to see happen. I think Mark Cuban would be tremendous.
Well, it solves two things for you, right? I mean, definitely solves the money problem. But then we've got another this is the legacy baggage branding of independence. We got another billionaire, right? Like here we go, another billionaire who thinks he can be king of the independents. And we've seen, Forbes and Bloomberg and so many others that think they're going to be, they can kind of jump in and be the billionaire king of the independents. And I got to tell you, man, like that's the kind of shit that pushes me away. If you got Mike Mullen, if you got, the ghost of John McCain, if you got someone, I've talked about the opportunity, I think within the military, maybe within sports, maybe within business, but business isn't trusted like it used to be. And maybe, celebrity. I mean, people would get behind a different Texan, Matthew McConaughey, probably much more than they get behind Mark Cuban, right?
So by the math, I'm not sure you're right, but I would love Matthew McConaughey. So to give you a sense of my number one draft picks, like that's like kind of the nature and character of them. The Rock would be on the list.
Yeah.
So folks like that, I'd be super pumped about. And that also, frankly, makes me the Dwayne Wade, which I'm, obviously totally amenable to. I mean, Dwayne Wade went on to win a couple titles,
I love
Couple more
Dwayne
titles, I should
Wade.
say.
I've met Dwayne Wade, awesome human being, big fan of Dwayne Wade. But to that point, sports, I think, is another area that Republicans, like you look at, the Tommy Tubervilles of the world, Herschel Walker, right? Like there's a unique populism, I think, around athletes that I think maybe is missing from the Forward Party right now, and maybe we'll see that from the next generation.
I love
but how
some
do
athletes too. And by the way,
Yeah.
there's so one of the things that's happening too, Paul, and I do, this is probably shocking to nobody, but a lot of people hit me up and say to me, "Hey, like you're doing the right thing, like I love it, I'm into it." Now, will most of those people, put that out publicly? Like, no, because what is their upside downside? It's like, like my downside is, let's see, like Democrats, Republicans, all of a sudden, aren't as excited about me and my like products or whatever the fuck I'm selling, or
Yeah, but they're waiting, right? Like they're all sitting there waiting.
So,
I've seen this happen.
Like this, the same thing happens in your.
We've all seen it. Is anybody
conversation.
building something? They wait to see until you're a success, and then nobody wants to be. I said this before. It's kind of like starting. Go back to the soccer analogy. It was like starting MLS. Like nobody wanted to be the first European player to leave and come to MLS, right? And like Beckham and others at some point, maybe later in the career, and that's kind of what you've got. You've got like upstarts or folks that are kind of in the B League, or maybe are old timers, but you haven't really gotten a prime timer yet, right? And maybe that takes me to another question, which is the competition component. You're the first there now. Forward Party is by default going to be a leading party for independents. If Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney or go start their own thing that's kind of more Republican light or GOP light, what does that do for your strategy and your ability to especially attract more national security focused independents and veterans and folks like that we've talked about?
Well, I think that we are the natural home for folks like that who are looking to flee the Republican Party, frankly. We've had conversations with both of those people. And you have to keep in mind, if someone, like, the reason why no one starts a party is because they have to go through all of the hurdles and hoops in all 50 states and have 51 orgs. The reason why people think that we're going to fall short is because on some level people know how next to impossible it is. So the last thing I'm worried about is like a bunch of other people raising their hands and saying, "Hey, I too am going to do the impossible."
Mm-hmm.
Like the main move they would make is to call us up and be like, "Hey guys, like, do you want to provide us a landing zone? And by the way, that means you do get tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of supporters. We have volunteer chapters in all 50 states, state leads in 45 of them. We do have funding in the millions of dollars. So if you were a human like Adam Kinzinger or Liz Cheney, are you really going to be like, I'm going to start, like this whole new thing? I mean, it would. They
might. I mean, like, it's.
Let's just say that's not on my concern list.
Yeah.
Because like I know what's on our plate, and you know what's on our plate, and it's a bitch. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
you look at it.
I've told you, man. I admire that you're doing it, and I think it's great. So much of what you're doing is great. But the question for me and so many other independents is like, we have a little bit of time. We have families, and we really care deeply. And we're also, I think this is maybe the essence of it. We're careful about who we put our family name on. Right. Like when I was playing football sports, they said, "Hey, your family name is on the back of your jersey. You're playing for your family." Right. And I called Kinzinger and Michael Steele and other Republicans out on this show when I've said the Republicans are trading on your family name. You're still with them and you're giving them your family name. So you're asking folks to do something really hard where they don't trust the parties, they don't trust the system, and you're asking them to join something new that they're unsure about, right? And I do think that's going to be an ongoing challenge. It doesn't mean I don't support what you're after, especially open primaries and the tactical things that I think are so critical to just increasing the number of people who are in the game, right? Just focusing on telling young people they don't have to pick a party. They don't know that, right? And if you can help move the needle on that, I think that's a huge outcome for the country.
Well, right now they kind of do need to pick a party if they're going to participate in a lot of places.
They don't have to though. Like that's the devil's dilemma, right? Like I was hoping you would run for mayor as an independent. But you made that choice, and you said, I'm not running as an independent. I'm running as a Democrat in New York, and you got clobbered for it, right?
Yeah, I mean, heck. so one of the things I want to lay out the timing. So first, let me say that I'm so proud that I was endorsed by the firefighters and police captains. Some of like the proudest days of my life, accepting those endorsements. So I write this book in 2020, and I figure out, hey, two-party system is broken. You need to create a better path, and there were three approaches to do it, which I didn't say in my book, but I'll say it here. One, you start a nonprofit. Problem probably won't work. No one will give a shit. Two, try and do it from within the two-party system. Will never happen because it's not in either party's interests, and you turn off half the country immediately. And then number three is you try and start a positive unifying third-party movement of the 50% of pissed off Americans and say, hey, we're going to change the system from here. So I figured this out, that plan C in this case is the only one that makes any sense. I figured that out at the end of 2020, and I try and figure out what I'm going to do. And I decided to run for mayor as a Democrat. You're probably right. I should have done so as an independent. But my plan was, if I get through and win, then I declare myself an independent from City Hall. And then, I've got 4 years and like everyone has to deal with it. And then I plant the flag and be like, hey, guys, there's a new political party, the United States of America. And the mayor of the biggest city in the country is the founder. So it's fucking real. And, might as well like start getting used to it. And now the drawback there is that.
So hold on, Andrew, if I can. So that was the plan? That was the plan?
Yeah.
Well, shit, I would have supported that plan. And I think a lot of people would have supported that plan if you had said that. So the plan was to run as a Democrat, get in there, and in the same way, I don't know, Bloomberg says he's not going to take a salary, and Adams says he's going to get paid in crypto, more substantially, obviously, you would have said, hey, I'm an independent.
Yes. And the
shit,
proof
man, that's not something we've heard before.
So the proof I have for this is that the manuscript was done at the end of 2020, and I already said like, hey, I'm starting the Forward Party. And then I had to tell the publisher, look, keep that manuscript in a vault, because if I just got to get through this fucking election, and then we can publish the book after I win. And then then we can have fun. And the publisher was like, well, shit, you might be the mayor of New York then and promoting this book, so I guess that's a win. So that that was always the design. I will say though that there was a significant part of me that thought that the Forward Party would have a better chance if I was actually building it, because if I was the mayor of New York City, I would have very little time to do party building. I would just be trying to make the city habitable.
And you'd be in a Shark Tank with everybody coming for your throat every single day.
All
right?
The time.
I mean, yeah. So, but I think that I'm glad to hear that, frankly. But I also it also takes me back to another question, which is, you've been great at pushing forward ideas, right? And it's been hard for you to get votes. It's been hard for you to get the conversion or the customer acquisition or whatever, example we want to use from the business world. So I think that's my question going forward is are you going to be able to actually build a sustainable model of membership, of activists, of people who say, I'm going to wear the Forward Party t-shirt on my chest? And I guess the question I have is, what did you learn from the mayor's race? What did you learn from running for president that will help this venture, frankly, be more successful in the outcome at the end?
Well, we're already the third biggest political party in the country by resources 13 months in.
Yeah, but by default, right?
But you can say what you want. It's like, that's a fact. My presidential campaign raised $40 million.
It's like being the best sixth man on the Miami Heat when you're the sixth man on the Miami Heat.
Again, I'm a numbers guy. My presidential campaign raised $40 million from over 400,000 Americans.
No doubt.
Made more presidential debate stages than our current vice president. My mayoral campaign got more individual donors than any mayoral campaign in the history of New York City. So anyone who looks at these things and says that like Yang can't build stuff is full of shit. I'm a serial builder who's built things like private sector, ran a private company, sold it to a public company, came out of nowhere, ran a national campaign that no one saw coming. Forward Party is on its way. Now, if you say, look, like, hey, the goal is to, win 51% of the vote in particular districts, I would say, well, sure. Like, let's try and find individuals who represent their constituents in that environment. and get them over the top, like Evan McMullin, like Clint
Yeah.
Smith, like whomever. And that has to be the goal of the Forward Party. But I'm pumped that we've made this much progress in this time.
And I think you should be, but I think there's also the difference here is that those, at least the two last ventures, right, were about supporting you and people who believed in you and people who wanted universal basic income on the presidential stage. And they wanted you. I thought you'd be a great champion for New York City. I loved how much you celebrated the city. I thought you'd be a great ambassador for the world and you'd inspire people when we needed it after COVID, right? But this is different. Right? This is a different product. The product, frankly, is not you, but you're the salesman who's used to selling you. So I think that's the rub, at least at this part in the development, that I'm stuck with, and I think many other folks are stuck with. So but
in this case, Paul, it's the product that you, in your case, have wanted already for a long time.
It's the outcome I want.
It's
an outcome I want. I don't know if it's the pathway to get there. That's where I keep coming back to. Like when you laid out those three.
And this is where I'm going to push back. Okay. Yeah. Because
if I want ranked choice voting, right?
Yes.
Or if I want, let's open primaries. Let's use that because that is the thing that I think is most urgent, right? Is the Forward Party going to help move that forward? Yes.
Yes.
You used the example earlier of three options, one of them being nonprofit. I actually saw this in the veterans movement where they raised $300 million and it was led in a nonprofit model and there were billionaires and small donors and it created a movement that now is propelled 50 nonprofits and, passed the GI Bill, parity around mental health, huge advances for the movement that are not unlike the political advances we're trying to get here. So I still go back to, I don't know if the party is the right strategy. Right. And I think it might be more of a nonprofit, even for-profit meld of something we haven't seen before. But we want the same things, Andrew. I think the question is, why, I think you're going to have a hard time, at least for now, getting folks to say, here's my email, here's my money, here's my time with Forward Party instead of open primaries or just supporting the Nevada initiative without you guys.
Well, if someone is busting their ass for open primaries or Fair Vote or any of the other awesome organizations who are doing stuff, fantastic. And the fact that Forward Party is representing another approach that's nakedly political, you can, if you were just to be like open-minded about, just be like, okay, it's like it's a missing piece of the puzzle that now it's filling in, and it might not be the thing that I want to like do because I'd rather volunteer for like the nonprofit. But I'm going to show very, very clearly an example of how this shit happens in real life, because politicians, shocker, will respond to politics. And if you look at the state of Connecticut, Governor Lamont came out for ranked choice voting 3 months ago. Why did he do it? Was it because a nonprofit presented him a white paper? Of course fucking not. The reason he did it was because his consultants told him that it was going to be worth 3% in the gubernatorial race against a Republican, and it was a tight race. Now, the reason why it was worth 3% is because there was a third-party gubernatorial candidate in Connecticut 4 years ago in 2018 that got 4% of the vote. It earned them a ballot line that then now this past cycle they had as currency to trade in return for both gubernatorial candidates endorsing ranked choice voting. So if you get 4% of Connecticut voters to say, I want this shit, or if you get 4% of American swing voters in Nevada, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Arizona to say, we want this shit, you can push the entire political system in a direction. If you stay on the sidelines and be like, hey, do this because it's the right thing, you know what they'll say? Fuck you. Because that is the way these guys work. That's you're really the best example. Behemoths or gubernatorial candidates, like they just want to win. You just got to make it a winning issue for them. There's no way to make it a winning issue for them without politics.
Yeah, you're also talking about finding a way to bring pain to them, right? Because I think politicians respond to pain, right? And maybe the best recent example is more like the Working Families Party, right? In New York, where they had a group of people, they had some power, and they yielded that power. And the question was, who is controlling that power, right? And I think that goes back to the questions of leadership. Who's going to be guiding this ship? And I think ultimately there are a lot of ways to get at these targets. And the Forward Party may be one way to inflict pain or move people. The Lincoln Project model may be another one, right? There are different ways to move Ned Lamont on ranked choice voting, but I do think the collective need is to put people on blast. Like, I've been asking everybody on this show who's a politician, do you support open primaries? Most of them have never been asked, right? And if you press them on that, whether it's through the Forward Party or paid media from the Lincoln Project or grassroots pressure from veterans, we can get to the same place. I think we're still kind of all dancing around each other, and we're looking for that really, truly galvanizing national leader. And I thought if Evan won, he would be it. Right, he would assume that mantle, and I think right now it's a little messy, and we're all working together. We're a little bit stepping on each other's toes, and if The Rock jumps in tomorrow and he's well educated, boom, it's fuel injection, and we're all going to get there. So I still go back to the leadership question, because I think parties by default are defined by their leaders, especially. And I hope that you spend as much time going after Admiral Mullen or Admiral Stavridis, especially folks from the national security and defense community, as you do going after the Mark Cubans of the world, because I think they might be a unique group that can crack through and have trust, right?
Yeah, and would absolutely love for more military leaders to come aboard. It's actually happening, and you can look at Veterans for Political Innovation. The alignment is pure, and there are folks who are part of Forward who are very, very close to that group. I mention in some ways the Mark Cubans of the world because I'm close to that group. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm an entrepreneur.
And Andrew, we also got to call it what it is. We need money, big money. And there's not big money. Veterans for Political Innovation, great group, good guys. They got zero funds. And you're right now also by default the big money guy. Now, maybe that decimal point will move. Maybe we can get a couple Mark Cubans in, but we got to get a real war chest. And that's like the conversation we got to have out loud.
And that's the operator mindset, Paul. That's the thing. Is like what Andrew Yang is like the leader of Forward, just as an instrumental thing. It's like you said, it's like de facto. Andrew Yang just wants to get the fucking job done. And so Andrew Yang's going to pass the hat and be like, it's funny talking about myself in the third person. It's funny, but just go around and like you said, like Cuban, other billionaires. By the way, 70% of business leaders right now think our political system is fucked. A lot of them were former Republicans who were like, yo, I'm not down with whatever the hell's going on now. This entire system has lost its way. It's irrational. And if you get in front of them and say, look, I have a genuine plan to fix this stuff by depolarizing our primary system, by getting rid of the party primaries, which, distorting incentives. And they hear that and they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense to me. Like Catherine Gale and Michael Porter's politics industry. That's like straight out of Harvard Business Review saying, look, the incentives are broken. Like, I can speak business to business dudes being like, look, guys, like you should expect fucked up shit out of the system because that's just what the incentives are. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, that's right. And so to me, this is a giant operational challenge.
Yeah.
And the thing that I would say to you and anyone listening is like, look, like, I don't care if you wear the jersey, like, as long as we just get the job done. And the Forward Party is just a way to get the job done, whether that's getting ballot access in different states, whether it's supporting independent candidates, whether it's supporting ballot initiatives, whether it's doing this 4 and 6 and 24, which is get this coalition of 4% of independent voters in the swing states. And if you resemble that, like, how are you going to know when this stuff rolls out? Just go to forwardparty.com. Like, I'm not asking you for a fucking tattoo. I'm just saying like, let's play team ball. You know what I mean?
I think that's that. I appreciate the sentiment and the ideas, but you're not asking for a tattoo, but you're asking for our family name, right? You're asking us to fly the flag. And like, that's, a lot of us are close, right? And I think maybe you can
just go to forwardparty.com, sign up, and not tell a fucking soul.
Yeah, like, but that's also, buddy, like, independents are also proud. Like, it's hard to be independent, right? And then it's hard.
Just unsubscribe as soon as we like piss you off or whatever. Or as soon as Yang goes out and does something like terrible.
the larger opportunity, Andrew, is that when independents get behind something, they're fierce. Right. And it's hard. It's a whole lot harder to be an independent than it is to be a party loyalist, especially right now. You're finding that out better than anybody. But I think we're getting to a point where I hope we can all come together around the shared values. That's where I keep talking about a movement. I've talked about the need for independent presidential debates, right? Michael Smerconic is doing the unconvention. Like, we're starting to bring together our movement in ways that are really, really powerful. And I want to give you a lot of credit for that, for taking on the hard fights. I want to be.
I'm actually going to throw out something about this independent presidential debate you're talking about. Yeah. Imagine a nomination process where you could vote on your smartphone, and then it gets confirmed via a QR code that's sent to your mailing address. And it doesn't need to be
I love
Iowa,
it.
New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. We can activate millions of Americans around the country. By the way, a lot of military veterans already done this, because this is how you had to vote when you were overseas.
Except when we couldn't. But yes, I appreciate that. There's always going to be a criticism of Democrats that they're great at ideas and they're poor at execution. This is not an idea challenge right now. It's an execution challenge. And I think
everything I just said is very mature technologically. Like the only thing and the great thing about having a party
the execution of all this individually, collectively, while we're fighting the forces that are so entrenched and are better funded. This is an insurgent, disruption, revolutionary campaign that we're all trying to wage. And I think we're all focused on a common enemy, right? Which is the broken political system and the existential threat to our democracy. And I think it's starting to come together, and I appreciate that. And I'm going to encourage it and do all I can to support it and to support you when I can without fully giving you my jersey. I know that you have other things to do, including the World Cup. I asked you to stick around for a couple extra questions for our amazing Patreon members. But before I do, maybe to wrap it up, Andrew, you are, in my view, a very brave person. And I think why so many people respect you is because you've been brave, because you've been in the arena, you stood on that stage, you took punches, you threw punches, and you put your family out there, which, I have little kids, you have little kids. That is immeasurably difficult. This is a hard time, and I think your legacy will be much bigger than the Forward Party. It'll be you as a transformative and role model type figure to so many people that are young. Can I ask you to leave folks, it's holiday times, with a message? How did you get through it, and how do you get through it, and what advice do you have for other people in getting through it?
Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate the kind words. For me, a lot of it's just making sure you can spend time with your kids and see things through their eyes for a little bit. And they never gave a shit what daddy was doing. Like they couldn't even watch the presidential debates because they were like, this shit is boring. Like drift off. So, as long as the people closest to you still view you in the way you want them to, and that you're able to be there for them. I've had some ups and downs this last number of years, but my family's been strong the whole time, and that's really the foundation of it. If my family hadn't been strong, then I'm sure I would have been in a very different place. So super grateful to my wife Evelyn for keeping us heading in the right direction.
I really do, believe that you and Evelyn have been role models in ways that folks can't fully quantify. We're going to hear from folks, from kids, a generation from now that got involved because they saw you and because they were inspired by you. And I think that's going to be maybe one of the most important parts of your legacy.
What's funny, Paul, is I actually see things in reverse. Like I think that the Forward Party is going to have this tremendous multi-generational legacy long after no one remembers who the heck Andrew Yang was.
Well, they're going to tell you to change the name 100 times if you want to attract independents and do all the branding manipulation
whatever that iteration of Forward is, man.
Right. Well, by then maybe Mark Cuban is giving you $1 billion and you're mayor of New York City as an independent, or maybe you're fixing the Jets, or maybe fixing the Knicks, which might even be a harder challenge.
Dude, the funniest thing that happened to me in all of this stuff is that I ended up in a feud with James Dolan when I said to someone and be like, if he really loved New York, he'd sell the team, which I thought was just like a, stupid Knicks fan joke that like everyone says. And then MSG had this like freaking, like, literally on MSG.com, like blasting me, and I'm like, are you kidding? Your press people are like, you're so thin-skinned.
These are the people. Didn't they throw out Charles Oakley, or they threw out somebody?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
I mean,
like the defensiveness, the pettiness, like that, like throwing out fans who also, by the way, yell at him, like sell the team and whatnot.
Well,
so
I would be all for
stuff.
him. I would be all for him making his music career his full-time job and having somebody else run the Knicks.
That was the most surreal. As someone who grew up a Knicks fan, that was the most surreal experience of this entire number of years. Was what the fuck? Like MSG is like being like, yeah, he doesn't know what he's talking.
But yo, you're asking. Part of what you're doing at the forward party is you're asking people who grew up in Manhattan as Knicks fans to go be Nets fans. Like that's what you're asking them to do sometimes, and that's a hard thing for us as independents. Is to like it is to understand what this new thing is, and you're really trying to rewire people in a way that I think is hard. But I think the future is the youngsters, right? The future is the youngsters.
Is that I want to provide a home for people who want that home, who benefit from it. I'm not someone who's going to be like, you must do this, like da da da. It's just that there are some people who really want a tribe to join. And it is like a way to organize people. It's a way to get you.
I get it. And I think you're going to get a lot of those, but I think the core of independents are none of the above. They don't actually want to join, and they don't want to be asked to join, and they don't want have to join. They want to be truly independent and to be able to have an a la carte series of options in their politics. And
one of my asks is to say, hey, look, help us create the a la carte menu, then we can disband. But,
all right.
But until we change that system, we should come together and then like break up right after. We'd be like,
we got a lot out in this one, man. This whole secret campaign to take over the Gracie Mansion is amazing. This sunsetting of the Yang era, I think, is interesting. I hope you'll come back, man. I've really appreciated this conversation and all your leadership. I'm so glad we finally got to chop it up. Our audience appreciates it. And I hope you'll come back and we can continue these conversations. I wish you and your family a very happy holiday.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Stay vigilant, Andrew.
Hug your loved ones.
Go Knicks.